In this video, we'll start working on our RSS Reader application, which is the culmination of everything that we've learned up to this point in time so far with Visual C# 2005 Express Edition. And we'll start by looking at the first two snapshots of our development effort. Now, what is a snapshot? We talked about this in the previous lesson. Basically, a snapshot is a distinct period in time where I stop what I'm doing, save it off into a different folder, and then talk about what it is that I did for the past hour or 2 hours or so. And so this way you can get several different perspectives on the progression of the software development. And I'll go through and say, okay, well, this is what I did in this snapshot. You can see, and we'll walk through each of the pieces that I worked on during that hour or two. And it also is helpful to you. You can download each snapshot, take a look at them on your own, and if you're trying to follow along and build the application on your own at the same time, then you can use it as kind of a reference, or if there was something that wasn't explained very clearly and you want to investigate it on your own, set some breakpoints and walk through the code, you're certainly welcome to do that. So make sure that you down the sample code for each of the snapshots from the same location where you downloaded this video. So let's jump right in and start talking about snapshot number 1. In this first snapshot, I took some of the very basic steps of getting started. I created a new project called RSS Reader. You can see that's loaded in the Solution Explorer. And I created 3 forms. The main form.cs, which is loaded in the main area. And we'll talk about each of the elements of that form in just a moment. And we'll come back later and talk about the folder dialog.cs and the channel dialog.cs. Now, if you'll recall from our discussion on designing the UI from lesson number 12, we talked about our preference to use a Explorer type interface, but maybe we didn't have the skills necessary to start there. So as you can see, I've kind of gone to a similar paradigm, but it's not using a tree control. Instead, we'll select a single folder, and when we select a folder, we'll be able to view all the channels, or all the RSS feeds rather, that are associated with this folder. So a folder is merely just a way for us to organize our channels, our feeds. And then when we select one feed, all of the news items that have already been collected from that feed will be displayed then in this news items box at the bottom. When selecting a single news item, then we'll be able to see the details of that news item on the right-hand side. So again, think of the Explorer view where we'll see the details over here on the right-hand side, the title, the description, the date it was posted or collected from the internet, and then we'll have a little bit of a browser view, a window that allows us to view the actual page where this entry, this article or blog posting or what have you can be found. And if we want to see that in a full window in Internet Explorer, we can click this expand link. Okay, so we'll come back to this in just a moment. Let's start off by talking about the controls and how I proceeded through the development of this. The first thing that I did was that I added what's called, and if you click just somewhere here in the gray background, go to the Properties window, a tool strip container. So if you go to the toolbox and you scroll down to menus and toolbars, you'll notice this control called a tool strip container. The description, as it pops open, says it provides panels, let's get that again here, on each side of the form that can contain one or more tool strip, menu strip, or status strip controls. Okay, so what does it really do? Well, let's go ahead and run our application. It's easier to show you than to really explain it at this point. So as you can see, I've got my menu here, my toolbar, and we'll come back to these in just a moment. I've got a status strip down here. But if you've ever looked at some of the Office applications, for example, they're very highly customizable. So you can move the menu around to a different part of the user interface. Or you can take the toolbars, for example, and move them along the side, move them to the bottom, move them over to the right side. And so this tool strip container allows you to customize the UI and move things around. Let's see if we can do that. I'm not sure we can do that yet with the menu or the status strip, but it's definitely useful for moving around and docking our toolbar controls, and if we have multiple toolbars, this comes really in handy. And so it's just an easy way for our users to play around with our application, customize it, so they can find the things that they need to do with the application very quickly. So that's why we chose to use the tool strip container right off the bat. Then I started placing things in the tool strip container. You can see on each of the sides of the form where the tool strip container is docked, these little bars with chevrons, and if you click on the chevron, you can see that it opens up an area where we can drag and drop controls into. So then basically I created some space and dragged and dropped a menu strip control. So by selecting it here in the little designer tray at the bottom of our form designer, you can see that it selects it as well up here at the very top, and then I was able to customize the entries. So in order to use the menu control, all you need to do is just select one of the type here spaces and start typing and adding things in. So for example, if I wanted to add some more menu entries to the file menu, for example, or to this new sub-menu, all I would need to do is start typing. So this is a test, and you can see that it would then appear in our menu. And if I double click it, it'll create an event handler for that menu item so that when somebody clicks it, that I can respond to that and write some code to work with it. Now, if I want to work with this in more of a property menu sort of way, I can merely select it, go to the property menu, and then select the items property, and now I have an items collection editor that allows me to work with each of the individual menus. Now you see this is hierarchical, so the menu strip contains, at this point, the file tool strip menu item and the help tool strip menu item. If I want to see the items that are below the file tool strip menu item, I'll have to go over and look at its item collection as well, which pops open a second version of this item collection editor. So now for this specific menu, the file menu, I can see there's a separator, and then there's the exit, and then there's this one that I just created. This is a test tool strip menu. I'm just going to delete it for right now. Okay, and click the OK button, and click the OK button. Now the neat thing about the menu strip that's new to Visual Studio 2005 is the use of this insert standard item. So when I click this, it'll add all the usual menu items that you see in most applications: file, edit, view, window, help, and so on. And I guess I can go ahead and do this right now. It won't hurt anything. I'll just not save my changes. And you see when I click that, it added the file, edit, tools, and help menu. And I can go through, and you can see they even come complete with the little keyboard shortcuts, as well as little icons that are listed on the side. Now it's up to you to implement all this functionality. That doesn't come just standard out of the box. You'll have to actually implement the cut and the copy and the paste and the select all and the customize and the options. This merely just sets them up on the menuing system for you. Okay, so that's the greatness of the menu strip. Now let's move on to the tool strip, which works very much in the same way. If I want to add a new item to the tool strip, there's a number of different ways I can go about it. As you can see over here, I have this little drop down, and I'm going to select it, and I can select to add to this tool strip either a button, a label, a split button, and several others: separator, combo box, progress bar. So you have a lot of functionality wrapped up in this tool strip and the menu strip controls. Now up to this point, I've only been using buttons, and you can see that I have already defined 7 buttons. Now how did I get my little neat icons there with the folder plus, edit, and delete, and then the channel plus, edit, and delete, as well as this RSS refresh icons? Well, there's a set of icons that I had a graphic artist create for me for this purpose, for developing this RSS reader application, and those are included in the download for this video. So make sure when you download the source code that you also get the icons for it as well. And what I did was simply right-click on a given button and select Set Image. This allows me then to select either a local resource that's on my hard drive, or to select a resource that has been added to the resource.resx file. Now, let's not worry about that too much. You can simply just go local resource, click the import button, and then find the GIF, JPEG, bitmap, PNG file, whatever it is. In this case, I believe they're all GIF files or bitmaps. Find them and then select them and then hit the open button. I'll go ahead and click cancel here. But I did that for each of the buttons on my toolbar. So just like the menu, even though I've got these neat little icons here, they really don't do anything yet. So we'll still have to write some code behind each one of them, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, moving on to the main area, you can see that we have this folder combo box. And notice also for all the things that I've added, all the controls that I've added, I've given them very distinct names. Notice that I followed a standard naming convention where I have used I guess you would say the noun or the purpose for this particular control. So in this case, it's the folder, and then the type of control, combo box, afterwards. So using some sort of standard naming convention helps you whenever you go to develop the application so that you can say, oh yeah, I want to work with that channel list box, and then I can find it in code, so to speak. Whenever I'm typing, I can have some confidence because I named things. I was so meticulous about naming things correctly that I don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about what did I name that control. Here I can just say, oh yeah, it was a channels list box, just like I would call it if I was speaking with you in plain English. So find a naming convention that works for you. Other people have other naming conventions. Sometimes it's a 3-letter acronym for the contraction for the type of control. So LST would be list box, for example. The combo box would be CBO or CBX. I've seen it. Text box would be TXT, title. In this case, I prefer to spell everything out. Title text box, description text box, date posted should be text box on the end there. So you can see maybe I wasn't completely thorough with my naming convention, but sometimes that happens and I'll have to go back and correct that. And also here I've got a web browser control that's been added to the design surface. Let me show you where to find that. If you look in the common control section of the toolbox at the very bottom, you can see it's a web browser. And this is basically just an implementation of Internet Explorer that allows you to view web pages in here. So if we wanted to actually show a web page, we would have to set the URL that we want the application to browse to, and we can do that in code. Okay. Now you can see here, I need to click the chevron up so it shows everything correctly. Great. So I spent some time lining things up, using the little align tools to make sure that everything pops in line, and had to think about the width of the boxes and things of that nature. I'm not still 100% satisfied, and I may want to come back and revisit this sometime in the future to allow resizing to make the application respond whenever the user tries to make it full screen, that the controls will actually move out properly. Didn't have enough time for that in this first iteration. Not even sure that we're going to be able to get to it by the last iteration, but as we continue through the snapshots, maybe in another set of videos or whatever, those are things that we can add to the process. Also, one thing of note here, you see here that I have used a label control that I've named expand label. And my intent is that when somebody clicks this label, that it will pop open Internet Explorer, and with this particular item, whatever's being displayed here in this window, in a full screen Internet Explorer browser. To do this, I used a label control. Now you might be thinking, well, don't you have a link label control available? And the reason I didn't use the link label is because it didn't give me the event that I needed. The link label is great if you know the URL ahead of time. However, I didn't have that. It didn't give me the properties and the methods that I really needed to do it the way that I want to do it. So I had to basically just use a regular label control and then change the forecolor property to blue and the underline property, as you can see here, to true as well. Okay, so finally I have at the very bottom a status strip, and the status strip is used to give your user some feedback about the application. So for example, whenever we're going through and pulling down new news items from all of the RSS feeds, the channels that we've subscribed to, then we want a little progress bar to let the user know how things are faring. If we've got a lot of channels, a lot of news items to bring down, then it will progress more slowly. If we only have one or two, it'll pop through very quickly. And then also not visible here, but right next to this progress bar is a label control. So let's do this. Let's just select our status strip, do like we did with the menu, and go to the items collection, look at the items collection editor for our status label, notice that we have a status label. So I'm sorry, I had it on the wrong side. It's actually in front. We'll want to change that before we're completely finished with the application. But in the status label, it's just basically a label control, and we're going to output some text based on the success or the failure of the various operations that the user has undertaken within the application. So, for example, if somebody says that they want to add a new channel, for example, if the channel adds successfully, we're not going to pop up in a message box. That's very disruptive to the workflow of the user. Instead, we might just write something out to the status label at the very bottom of our application that says that the new channel was added successfully. Okay. If they cancel the operation by clicking the cancel button on one of the dialogues, which we'll look at in just a moment, we may want to say that the add channel operation was canceled by the user, just to let the user know what was just accomplished or not accomplished within the tool. Okay, and we'll have more to say about this in snapshot number 9 when we actually implement the progress bar and the status label within our application. So I'm just going to click cancel for now. Now, before I leave this, I've already kind of tried to stress the importance of the naming convention. But at this point also, before I leave this, I may want to go through and set the tab properties or the tab order for my user interface. If I haven't already done so, let's see if we've taken the time to do that. So as you can see, our combo box has a tab index of 1. You can see here that the channels has a tab index of 5, so I haven't taken the time to do that. I could go through each one of these boxes from the left column top to bottom, then onto the right column top to bottom, and assign them a sequential tab index number. Also, do you remember how we do this from the lessons? Really early on, we talked about how to use the little tab order button. It's actually on the toolbar here, tab order, which allows us to take a look at each of the controls and then click on the next one. So here, we'll start here. We'll go, whoops, I just went through them all. Start off by clicking and going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I think that's about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and click that off. And now if we run our application, the user can use only the keyboard in order to navigate through each of the controls on their form. Okay, I just thought of one other thing I wanted to point out here before we move on. The description text box, I don't think this is something we talked about. We want it to display on more than one line, so what I did was enter the multi-line property and set it equal to true. Additionally, I wanted to allow the little scroll bars to appear whenever too much text was entered in this text box, and so I set the scroll bars equal to vertical. Okay, so this makes it now able to accommodate quite a bit of text and allows the user to be able to scroll through it if they need to in order to view it all. Okay, so moving on, let's take a look briefly at the channel dialog, and this will appear, whoops, let's start with the folder dialog, I apologize. Our intent for this is whenever somebody selects either the add or the edit folder buttons from our toolbar, then we would want to pop open this folder dialog. So if they're trying to add a new folder, all they would need to do is type in the name for that folder, select the OK button, and then it will be displayed in this list of folders in our combo box. And we can add channels to it and so on. Very simple concept. We're going to use that same dialog box, the same form, for the edit functionality. So whatever folder is selected in our combo box and we select the edit folder, it'll pop open the folder dialog. It'll have the folder ID and the name of the folder, and we can change it, edit it any way we want to. Select the OK button or select cancel if we changed our mind and wanted to leave it named that, and then it will make the appropriate change. Same is true for the selected channel. We can either add a new channel or edit a selected channel from the list that's in the channel list box. And by doing so, we'd be able to select which folder this channel belongs in, Give it a title and give it a URL as well. Select the OK or Cancel button. If we're editing, we can make the changes from the selected channel that was selected before the button was clicked to open up this channel properties, and then click the OK or Cancel button to make the appropriate change. Okay, we haven't implemented any of that functionality yet. What have we done in terms of code? Well, not much. You can see that if I double click, I have stubbed out all of the code for each of the menu items, the toolbar buttons, and even, I think, the main form itself. Now, what is stubbing out? Stubbing out is simply just creating some code that reminds us what we need to do before we can say our application is finished. So I don't have time to, for example, create the new folder functionality right now. I may need to take a break, go home for the evening, whatever the case might be, but I want to remind myself that this functionality is not complete. So I create a to-do item and then create a comment with appropriate text, and give myself a little message box to display this to myself and anybody who might be using my application while I'm testing it. And this is just a way of reminding yourself that this functionality is not complete. We'll talk about this to-do item in one of the later snapshots, and we'll see how these become very helpful as we're trying to tie up all the loose ends in our application development, so we don't forget something that we always intended to do but never found the time because we needed to move on to something else. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this first snapshot. Let's continue to work on the application. I think what we'll do next is just make sure that from our main form we can click on our buttons here and it'll simply open up either the folder dialog or the channel dialog respectively. So that's what we'll work on next. Okay, so after about 45 minutes or so, we have snapshot number 2, and let's just demonstrate very quickly what the end result of this snapshot was. If you click on New Folder or Edit Folder, or if you click on Add Channel or Edit Channel, it'll pop open one of the property forms. Now notice that whenever the folder properties dialog is available, I can't switch back over to the RSS Reader application. It is what's called non-modal, or rather a dialog. If I was able to switch back and forth between these two forms, then that would be known as, they would be both known as modal forms. However, in the non-modal, this requires the user to take an action on this form before they can continue using the rest of the application. So that little tidbit of information will become very important in just a moment. Okay, next I wanted to make sure that I'm able to communicate back to my main form what button the user clicked, whether they clicked the OK button or the Cancel button. We'll talk about how we do this in just a moment, but just to prove the point, whenever you click the OK button, I simply pop open a little test message box. We'll remove this in the future, don't worry. And for example, when I click the Edit and I click the Cancel, then you can see the user select the Cancel button. Same thing is true whenever we're working with the channel properties, and both in Add and Edit mode. Okay. So what did I do here? And why did I do it? Well, first of all, I just wanted to make sure I get some of the easy things out of the way. I want to make sure that my form can communicate, and so this really is helpful if I were to have somebody over the house right now. I could explain to them, well, this is what I'm doing, and I can kind of walk them through the application. It also gives me a sense of confidence that this is going to, the flow, and it helps me kind of work through the application in my own mind. Is the flow right? Is this convenient for the users? Did I have to do this next? No. But it is something that would eventually need to be done, and I just decided to tackle it right now. So sometimes you just have to make judgment calls on what you're going to work on next. Typically, if I'm working on the UI, I want to get many things associated with the UI kind of worked out and ease into the development process. Then I might turn my focus on to some of the more complex aspects of the application and get those out of the way next. So just a little bit of a confidence builder. Okay, now how did I do it? That's the big question. So let's go ahead and double click on any of our buttons. We'll start off with the Add Folder button, and you can see here that I have some code. I'm first of all creating a new instance of that folder dialog.cs. So I've not really used a very good naming convention here. I've just plucked out something off the top of my head. I called it F. We'll revisit this in the future. Typically, you want to be a little more careful about how you name things, but I know that I'm going to come back to this in a few moments and probably rename a bunch of things. So the next line of code, line number 82, I create an instance of a dialog result object called result, and I will put into that result object the result of the show dialog method of our new F object, the folder dialog. So whenever you want to pop open another window, you'll either use the show method or the show dialog method. If you use the show method, then you put your windows in a modal way of working. So there will be the ability to work with one form or the other and have them both displayed at the same time, and you can switch back and forth between the two of them. With a dialog, or rather using the show dialog, the user will have to work with the folder dialog in this case before, and hit either OK or cancel, close down the form, before they can start working again with the main form. So that's the difference. And I wanted to use show dialog because I want to get feedback from the user about what they accomplished, so that I can accurately reflect that and update the main form. So that's why I use show dialog. Now, the cool thing is that show dialog will tell us whether the user clicked the OK or the cancel button. Now, based on that, we're going to check, did the user click the OK button? If so, we'll take a certain action. If they click the cancel button, or any other button that we might have, then we'll say, well, in this case, just pop open the message box says that the user selected the cancel. Then finally, we're going to set a null reference to our folder dialog, essentially taking it out of memory. Okay. So now, in order to get this to work, we had to do something special with our folder dialog. So let's open that up and take a look at the OK and cancel buttons. So I'm going to go over here to the Properties window, and I had to set a special property in order to get this whole system to work. I have to make sure that the dialog result property is set for both my OK and cancel buttons. If it's not set, then I'm not going to get the results that I want. Also notice that there's a number of other dialog results that we could add. So if we had abort, retry, ignore, yes, no, those are other dialog results that we can track for using this show dialog method. Okay, so hopefully this is all making sense. I'm going to open up the dialog based on whether the user clicks OK or cancel. We'll grab that result, check it against a list of enumerations. So in this case, dialog.result.OK. You can see here, we'll do this just real quick. Cancel, abort, all those possibilities that we saw whenever we looked at that list of dialog results for the given control, the command button in the folder dialog.cs. In this case, we want to make sure it's OK. Based on that, we'll take two separate actions. So basically, I've done that for the Add Folder Toolstrip button, for the Edit Folder Toolstrip button. Let's see what else we have here. And for the Add Channel, something very similar. Channel dialog, F equals new channel dialog. That's the only thing that's really different. Everything else is pretty much the same. Same thing would be true then with the Edit Channel Toolstrip button click event. Essentially the exact same code. Okay, so we've worked about an hour and a half so far. We've set up our project. We've got all of our controls in place that we're going to use. We're able to open up the dialogues, and we'll implement those more fully in the next several snapshots. Now, in the next video, what we want to do is start implementing some more of the more difficult functionality. And the reason why I'm turning my attention to that at this point in time, the more difficult functionality, is because I want to take the biggest risk and address that first. This is just my style of coding. Some people might put this off to the very end. Some people might tackle it before they even tackle the UI. In my particular case, I wanted to get the UI looking good, standardized, and then I'm going to take on the biggest unknown, and that is, how am I going to retrieve data from the internet, specifically XML data in the form of the RSS specification, and I want to see if I can just grab all that data down and display it on screen in some way. I'm not going to worry about saving it in a database just yet. I just want to make sure that I can at least do that next step. So at least in my mind, I have my next goal for my next snapshot, and I'll meet you in the next lesson. Thank you very much.